Less than 24 hours after being sentenced for the murder of Austin Metcalf, Karmelo Anthony has been moved out of Collin County and into the state's prison system. This is the picture just sent to us within the last half hour from the TDCJ. We're told he's being held in the Wallace PAC unit near Navasota, a little more than 70 miles northwest of Houston.
A Wednesday morning, the 2nd of April 2025, 10 o'clock. There are hundreds of teenagers inside Kuykendall Stadium in Frisco, Texas. It's a UIL District 11-5 championship track meet. Multiple schools competing. Athletes in school colors are warming up, stretching, laughing. Coaches are checking clipboards. Parents are filtering in through the gates. This is what normal looks like. Then the sky changes. A Texas spring storm rolls in fast the way they do down there. Hard rain, rolling thunder. Athletes scatter from the infield and pile under their school's tents in the bleachers, shoulder to shoulder, waiting it out. It's loud. It's crowded. It feels completely safe. At 9:55 inches the morning, a surveillance camera positioned near the press box captures something underneath one of those tents. The camera is too far away to clearly identify faces. What it records is a sudden movement, an interaction between two figures, then people scattering in every direction. An ambulance enters through a gate at the end zone. Paramedics rush toward the bleachers with a stretcher, realize they cannot get it up the stadium steps, and carry it up by hand. They surround a boy on the ground. A football coach from another school, a military veteran, drops to his knees and starts CPR, pressing his own jacket against the wound. His voice cuts through all of the noise. Stay with me, Austin. Austin Metcalf is 17 years old. He is a 4 gigapascal student, the MVP linebacker of his football team, an identical twin. College scouts are already watching him. He has a girlfriend who says he is the glue holding her whole life together. He had never met the person who just stabbed him through the heart. The knife was already in the bag before any of this started. That is the sentence this entire story turns on, and we are going to follow it step by step, from a Wednesday morning in Frisco, Texas, through a Collin County courtroom 14 months later, to a verdict that took a jury less than 3 hours to reach, and a victim impact statement that nobody who heard it will ever forget. Frisco, Texas, sits about 20 minutes north of Dallas. It is one of the fastest growing cities in America. Brand new school campuses, gleaming athletic facilities. The kind of place where Friday nights in the fall feel like the center of the universe, because in Texas, they kind of are. Austin Matthew Metcalf was born on the 31st of July, 2007, 2 minutes before his twin brother, Hunter. The boys grew up the way twins grow up when they are that close, inseparable in a way that people who are not twins can only guess at. Same team, same field, same house, same everything. By the time Austin was a junior at Frisco Memorial High School, he was already the kind of player coaches notice. He played inside linebacker, the kind who closes fast and hits harder than you expect. His teammates and coaches voted him team MVP, not coaches alone. His own teammates chose him at 17. His father, Jeff, described him as a natural leader. His mother, Megan, said college football programs were already reaching out. His dream was to play in college, and by all accounts, it wasn't just a dream, it was a plan in motion. But here's what did not fit neatly into a highlight reel. Austin Metcalf tutored kids in algebra. His friends at his memorial service talked about his loud, over-the-top cheering at other people's games because he always made a point to show up for whoever was competing, even when he wasn't. His girlfriend read a poem at the memorial that she said he inspired. She said he was the glue holding her whole life together. His twin brother, Hunter, described him as a peacemaker. That word was going to become unbearably relevant. Austin also ran track, and that spring of 2025, he was competing in the UIL District Championship. Hunter was there too. They were always there for each other. What Jeff Metcalf told NBC News the day this happened should be the thing you carry forward as you hear the rest of this story. He stood outside a hospital and said, he was the most amazing kid, so smart. College guys were looking at him. His goal was to play in college. And then Jeff Metcalf said 4 words. This is murder, not an accident, not a fight, not a tragedy. This is murder. He knew. Standing in a parking lot, his son already gone. He knew from the first minute what this was. Austin Metcalf had a whole life scheduled, a diploma, a college field, a career, a family someday. On the morning of the 2nd of April, 2025, he went to a track meet. He never came home. Here is what we know about Karmelo Anthony on the morning of the 2nd of April, 2025. He was 17 years old, a junior at Frisco Centennial High School, 5 miles from Memorial. He was a team-elected football captain. His own teammates chose him, which tells you something about how he carried himself. He played defensive back. His coaches and teammates called him Mellow. By every account from people who knew him, he was competitive, athletic, driven. He was also at the UIL track meet that morning. And somewhere between waking up that morning and arriving at Kuykendall Stadium, Karmelo Anthony put a knife in his bag. That fact, that single choice, is the hinge point of this entire case. Not the argument that followed, not the push, the knife in an athletic bag at a school championship event at a high school track meet. His own coach, Centennial track coach Adam Linwood, took the stand during the trial. Prosecutors asked him a direct question. Is there any reason an athlete should have a knife at a track meet? Linwood said no. That is not commentary. That is Karmelo Anthony's own coach on the witness stand saying no. Around 10 o'clock that morning, the sky opened up. A Texas spring storm, hard rain, thunder forced the meet into a weather delay. Athletes everywhere scrambled for cover under their school's tents. Memorial High School's tent was set up in the bleachers near the 5-0 yard line. Austin was there. Hunter was there. A dozen or more teammates were there. Centennial's tent had not arrived on the morning bus, according to testimony later in the trial, so Anthony needed somewhere to go. He chose the Memorial tent. The defense would later argue that track meets are social events, that athletes mingle between schools, that there was no official Frisco ISD rule prohibiting a student from walking into another team's tent. That is technically accurate, but also accurate. Anthony was wearing a Centennial High School tracksuit. Every kid under that Memorial tent could see exactly which school he was from. And when he sat down, people noticed. The first person to say something was Hunter Metcalf, Austin's twin. He told Anthony this was their team's tent and he needed to leave. Anthony didn't leave. Austin stood up. Based on the police report and the testimony of more than 24 witnesses, students, and coaches who were physically present, here is what happened next. Austin confronted Anthony directly. Words were exchanged. At this point, it was still verbal. Then Anthony reached into his bag. A 16-year-old Memorial linebacker who was sitting there with headphones in testified at trial about what he heard Anthony say next. The words were directed at Austin Metcalf. Touch me and see what happens. Not a warning, a dare. The prosecution would later spend significant time on those 6 words because those 6 words carry legal weight. You do not say, touch me and see what happens when you are afraid. You say it when you have already decided what your response is going to be, when the weapon is already within reach. Austin Metcalf told Anthony he was not going to fight him. His exact words, per witness testimony, I'm not going to fight at a track meet. And then Austin pushed him, both hands, to his shoulder area. No weapon, just a shove to move him out of the tent. In the final moments before Austin Metcalf was killed, he told his killer he wasn't going to fight. And then he pushed him with his hands. Anthony reached into the bag, pulled out the knife, stabbed Austin once, left side of the chest. Austin Metcalf had never met this person before that morning. The whole thing, from the first word to the stab, was under 30 seconds. Hunter Metcalf would say that later, almost in disbelief. Under 30 seconds. Hunter got to his brother as fast as he could. He put his hands on the wound. He held on. He looked at Austin's face. I grabbed his hand and looked in his eyes, Hunter told Fox News in the days after. I just saw his soul leave, and it took mine too. Coaches from nearby schools rushed in. Joshua Redman, a coach from Liberty High School and a military veteran, dropped to his knees and started CPR. He pressed his own jacket against the wound to try to stop the bleeding. Audio from the scene, played at trial 14 months later, captured his voice, cutting through the chaos. "Stay with me, Austin." The ambulance arrived. Paramedics worked on Austin in the bleachers. They loaded him at 10:15. The ambulance did not leave until 10:20. Austin Metcalf died from his injuries. Karmelo Anthony ran. He left the tent immediately after the stabbing, moved through the stadium, and threw the knife somewhere in the bleachers on the north side. He did not have it on him when police found him minutes later. A school resource officer from a nearby middle school who happened to be present at the meet was pointed out to Anthony by witnesses and chased him down. The officer cuffed him, said into his radio that he had the alleged suspect in custody. Anthony's response was immediate, voluntary, unprompted. Before the officer had asked him a single question, "I'm not alleged. I did it." He also said, walking to the squad car, "He put his hands on me. I told him not to. He asked the officers whether what happened could be considered self-defense." There was blood on his left middle finger. The knife was found in the bleachers where he had thrown it, being sheltered by a blue tarp an officer placed over it to preserve evidence. In one of the stranger details of an already brutal scene, the officer used a nearby backpack to weigh down the tarp against the wind and did not realize until later that the backpack belonged to Karmelo Anthony. Officers located approximately 24 student witnesses and 4 coaches. Every single statement pointed in the same direction. 14 months later, Collin County Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Elizabeth Ventura took the stand at the Collin County Courthouse in McKinney, Texas, and told the jury exactly what a 2-inch knife blade traveling into the left side of a 17-year-old boy's chest actually does. It perforated the bone at the center of his chest. It perforated the sac that surrounds the heart. It penetrated the right ventricle. The wound was gaping 2.5 inches in length. Dr. Ventura said it plainly. It was not survivable. The judge warned the gallery that her testimony and the autopsy photos that followed would be graphic. Austin's mother left the courtroom. Some of Austin's friends stayed. Multiple witnesses reported that several of them were in tears. Karmelo Anthony sat at the defense table and looked at his lap while the photos were displayed. Dr. Ventura also told the jury something the defense needed them to hear, and it wasn't good for the defense. There were no defensive knife wounds on Austin Metcalf. None. If Austin had been lunging at Anthony, grabbing for the knife, there would likely be cuts on his hands, his forearms. There weren't. Austin Metcalf pushed someone with both hands to the shoulder and was stabbed through the heart in return. The final piece of evidence the prosecution presented before the jury adjourned for the day was Coach Redman's jacket, the one he had pressed against the wound, the one still stained with Austin Metcalf's blood. It was placed on the evidence table where 12 people could look directly at it. Legal observers noted the timing was deliberate. It was the last thing the jury saw before they went home that night. By the time this case went to trial in June 2026, it had already become something larger and uglier than a murder case. It had gone national. And not simply because a 17-year-old was stabbed to death at a high school championship event in broad daylight, though that alone should have been enough. It went national because Karmelo Anthony is black and Austin Metcalf was white, and because the internet took that single fact and built an entire alternate reality around it. Fundraising campaigns for Anthony's legal fees raised over $500,000 online. The Metcalf family became targets. Austin's mother's home was swatted. Someone called 911 and reported a shooting inside, triggering a full SWAT response, drones entering the house, officers surrounding a property where a grieving mother was already trying to survive the impossible. Austin's father, Jeff, received threats by phone and text. A stranger showed up at his front door and banged on it. A man who had already buried his son was being targeted for it. Jeff Metcalf responded to all of it with a clarity that did not bend. "I said from day one this was never about race," he said. It's about right and wrong. We all bleed the same color. A gag order covered the case through most of the pretrial period. No electronics in the courtroom, maximum 9 media members at a time inside. Judge John Roach ran a tight ship. Trial began the 1st of June, 2026, at the Collin County Courthouse in McKinney. 21 witnesses for the prosecution, 4 days of testimony. Session after session in which students who had been at that track meet, some of them still in high school, sat in a witness box and told a jury what they saw. And what they saw, again and again, was the same thing. Anthony in the tent. Anthony refusing to leave. Anthony reaching into his bag. Anthony saying those words. Austin's push, the knife. One witness asked directly whether what happened was self-defense, said something that cut through every legal argument in the room. That's lethal force against non-lethal force. A teenager in a witness box, summing up the entire case in 5 words. The prosecution's theory never changed and never needed to. Lead prosecutor Bill Worski told the jury that Karmelo Anthony brought a weapon to a place where weapons have no business being, refused to leave a tent that wasn't his, escalated a confrontation he could have walked away from at any point, issued a direct dare, and when that dare was met with a shove from an unarmed boy, drove a knife into his heart. Under Texas law, murder means you knowingly caused someone's death. Not recklessly, knowingly. And that knife in the bag before a single word was exchanged was proof that on some level, Anthony had already decided. The defense had a harder job. Mike Howard argued that Anthony entered the tent to speak with a friend, that he was aggressively confronted, that when Austin physically grabbed and pushed him, he felt genuinely threatened and acted in self-defense. Texas has no duty to retreat. You can stand your ground. Howard argued that in that moment, Anthony believed he had to act. What the defense could not argue away was the knife. What it could not argue away was the absence of defensive wounds on Austin Metcalf. What it could not argue away was Anthony's own coach saying there is no reason to bring a knife to a track meet. And what it could not argue away was the fact that Karmelo Anthony chose not to take the stand, meaning the only version of self-defense the jury ever heard came from a defense attorney, not from the person who was there. There is a reason that matters. Self-defense is a human story. It requires a human voice behind it. It requires 12 people looking at a defendant and believing in their gut that this person was genuinely afraid for their life and had no other choice. When that voice is absent, what remains is the other story. The one told by 24 witnesses, a medical examiner, a bloodstained jacket, and 4 words spoken voluntarily to a police officer before anyone had asked a single question. The jury got the case on Tuesday, the 9th of June, 2026. They deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty, murder, not manslaughter. The lesser charge was available to them and they rejected it. Murder, knowing, intentional. When the verdict was read, the Metcalf side of the courtroom experienced something that witnesses described not as celebration, but as release. The end of 13 months of waiting for someone official to say what Jeff Metcalf had said standing outside a hospital the day his son died. On the other side of the courtroom, Karmelo Anthony's family wept differently. Anthony dropped his head. He was escorted out briefly. When he came back for the punishment phase, witnesses said his eyes were red and wide, his jaw hanging open. The reality of where he was had arrived. 14 months of hope, and it was gone. His mother, Kayla Hayes, was the defense's only witness in the punishment phase. She was on the stand in under 30 minutes, within the hour of her son being found guilty of murder. Her attorney asked her one question. Did she believe her son regretted what he had done? She said she loved him. She said she knew he was sorry. The jury sentenced Karmelo Anthony to 35 years in prison. They could have gone to 99. They could have imposed life. They gave him 35 enough, the prosecution argued, to be meaningful, and perhaps, some observers noted, just enough to leave open a door that Austin Metcalf will never walk through. Anthony was 19 years old the day they sentenced him. He will not be eligible for parole until he has served at least half of that sentence. He will be in his mid-30s, at the earliest, when that question is asked. Prosecutor Worskey said something in closing that deserves to be heard fully. He told the jury that Jeff Metcalf, Megan Metcalf, and Hunter Metcalf also carried life sentences. Not the kind that ends at a parole board hearing, not the kind measured in years, the kind where you carry the weight every day for the rest of your life and nobody reviews it and nobody lets you out early and it never stops. He called it a void in their home and a void in their heart. He said Austin Metcalf would never come back. No matter how much time passes, no matter how much healing, he will never come back. And that is not a sentence with a number attached to it. In May of 2026, a few weeks before the trial began, Hunter Metcalf walked across a graduation stage at Frisco Memorial High School. He accepted his own diploma. Then he walked back, turned around, walked back up the stairs, and accepted Austin's. The auditorium gave him a standing ovation. Austin Metcalf would have been in that graduating class. He had 4 gigapascals. He had a future in football that people who watched him believed in. He had a whole next chapter already being written. Hunter accepted a piece of paper on his behalf. Then he went to a murder trial. After the verdict, after the sentence, Hunter Metcalf stood in front of Karmelo Anthony and asked him directly to look at him, to actually look at him while he spoke. "You took a son, a brother, a friend, my best friend from this world," Hunter said. "You took someone away from me who was supposed to be an uncle to my kids." He said, "You let the devil take over in that moment." He said, "Eventually your name will be forgotten, but my brother's memory will live on." And then he said the words that stopped the room. "You still have air while my brother is 6 feet under." He paused. "I wake up every morning and his door is still shut." That is not poetic language. That is not something someone crafted for a statement. That is a boy describing the first thing he experiences every single morning, the physical, real, daily reality of going through a house where his twin brother no longer exists. The door is shut because Austin is not behind it. The door is shut because it will always be shut now. And the person who made it that way is sitting 10 feet away, still breathing. Jeff Metcalf stepped forward on those courthouse steps after it was over and said the thing that had been building in him for 13 months. "People think grief is sadness," he said, and then he paused, and then he slammed his fist down. "It is not. It is rage. Pure, unfiltered rage." That fall, the Frisco Memorial Warriors dedicated their entire football season to Austin Metcalf. Their motto, all in. His number, 11. Hunter, team captain, carried his brother's jersey onto the field at the first home game, draped over his shoulder during the coin toss. The stands were full. People wore all-in t-shirts. The team played for someone who would never play again. Karmelo Anthony is currently in the custody of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. He is 19 years old. He brought a knife to a high school track meet. He refused to leave a tent that wasn't his. He issued a dare to an unarmed boy. He stabbed that boy through the heart. He threw the knife. He ran. And when an officer said the word alleged, he corrected him. A jury of 12 people looked at all of it and needed less than 3 hours. Austin Matthew Metcalf, the 31st of July, 2007, the 2nd of April, 2025. MVP linebacker, honor student, peacemaker, twin brother. He never got to play college football. He never met his nieces and nephews. He never got to see what he was going to become. Every morning, his door is still shut.